Hey, fifth grade. Welcome to Podcasts with Mrs. Dickens. Each week, I'm going to be walking you through a podcast. This one is called Young Ben Franklin. You've just listened to episode 1, and you have found out that Benjamin Franklin in this podcast is 14 years old. This is before he is a famous inventor, before he is part of our history as an adult. He was a statesman. He did so much more. But before that, he was a kid. He was a kid with a lot of ideas, a lot of spirit, and it sounds like he is pretty good at getting in trouble. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you heard in episode 1. I'm going to show you what you are expected to do for this lesson, and then I will let you get to it. So I want to talk about the printing press. So you heard on there that Ben is with his older brother, and his older brother works at a printing press. I want to tell you what a printing press is. So a printing press is going to be a place where you print the press, like a newspaper, announcements. So they were very complicated machines. Today we have newspapers that are able to print out hundreds of thousands of newspapers every minute. And we have different size fonts and different colors, and we have pictures, and there are these elaborate newspapers that we have today. Well, back in the 1700s, it wasn't that case. Here's an example of what a newspaper article could have looked like or did look like back during colonial times. I'm actually going to show you a video of a printing press, and this is a printing press that is in Philadelphia, and this individual is giving a tour of the printing press and talking about what Ben Franklin would have done when he was working with this machine. So I'm going to go to this tab here, and I'm going to show you this video. It's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
That's all they had in Franklin's day. They weren't making paper out of trees. Rag paper still exists, but it's more expensive than wood pulp paper. So it's usually reserved for 2 things. Number 1, wedding invitations. Number 2, dollar bills. Our money is printed on rag paper because it is more durable than wood pulp paper. Your rag paper is also dampened with water. That may sound a little strange, but consider that's some sticky ink it has to absorb. It's more absorbent when it's wet, and there were many recipes for ink, but Franklin thought the Dutch had the best recipe, so he imported their good quality ink from Holland. It was tree sap, soot, that gave it some color. Third ingredient, linseed oil, that's the drying agent. Very simple recipe, but effective. Now, ideally, 2 people operate the press. That's not always the case. Sometimes 1 person does everything. But if you have 2 people, 1 inking and a second person pressing, you can move faster. How fast? 1 print every 15 seconds. Not bad. That is pretty fast. And you would be surprised at what Franklin printed on one of these. Lottery tickets. Even lottery tickets. No job was too big or too small. Now, what we've just printed are the last letters exchanged between George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. It's not as though they had a bitter falling out. They did not. They respected one another, but Franklin died. He was 84. Pretty respectable. Look up. That's where this is heading. Wherever it lands. The paper is damp. The ink is sticky. Safest place for this to dry is above your head. Remember, the paper's recycled cloth. The best analogy I can think of, tie-dyeing, right? We just tie-dyed a t-shirt. Now you're hanging it up on the clothesline to dry. Let me show you one other thing. It surprises people.
All right. So that gives you an idea about what Ben Franklin's brother did and what he was being asked to do. So he is going into work on a printing press. And this large printing press takes a lot of time to get everything set up. And as you can see, the paper is not the same as we have today. The ink is not the same, and we don't have the big machines. It took a lot of work. So this is where Ben Franklin looks like he's going to be working. Okay, and he's going to be working with a different type of paper. The paper that we have today wasn't actually created back yet. They worked with paper that was made from recycled linen and rags. Okay, linen. So there was cloth. It was made from recycled cloths, and they were able to make paper out of it. So this is where Ben Franklin is looking like he's going to be spending some of his time. This is where his brother wants him to be, because that's where his brother works. Okay, and what's the best thing? What's the best way to get a troubled youth, out of keeping him out of trouble? Well, it's by keeping him working and busy all day long. So his brother's just looking out for him and trying to do the best he can for him. Another thing that we learn in the text is a little girl is introduced to us, and we find out that she needs the help of one of the other characters in the book, and she is what we call an indentured servant. And I want to let you know what an indentured servant is, because it's different than a slave. Slaves were forced to come over here they were forced into slavery, right? They were brought over against their will, and for the rest of their lives, they were a slave. They could be sold to other people. They had no freedom. They were looked down upon. They were treated terribly. Slavery was a thing, unfortunately, but it's different than what an indentured servant is. An indentured servant is someone who was a European, and they wanted to come over to the colonies. So in order to come over to the colonies, they found someone who would hire them. And someone would hire them, and before they got hired, they had to sign a contract. And that contract was stating that that individual was going to sign away a certain amount of years of their life. So they would say, you will pay for me to get to the colonies. Once I'm in the colonies, then I will work for you for so many years for free, right? Because this individual is now in debt. Their whole entire transport to the colonies has been paid for them. And so they didn't have the money to get there. Now they're working for free to pay that off. So when their time is up, if they signed a 7-year contract and after the 7 years is up, then they don't have to work for that individual anymore. They could sign another contract, or they could go and do something else. They were not forced to work for that person forever. Yes, they worked for free, but it was for a limited time. Okay? So, now that I've kind of given you a little bit of the background, I want to tell you what it is that you guys are going to be working on. So on this slide here, which is slide 7, I'm going to talk about point of view. So what is point of view? Okay, remember, the point of view is a way that you can find out who is telling the story. So I've given first person and third person because we don't often hear second person. So first person, the narrator is a character in the story, and they are describing their own thoughts and feelings. Whereas third person is when the narrator is not a character in the story, and they're describing they're describing the other character's thoughts and feelings. Okay, so based off of episode 1, I want to know, who do you think is telling the story? And you are going to type your response here. Okay, so who do you think is telling the story first? Then what is the point of view? And you're going to write that in the second box. Third box is what evidence tells you this. So using evidence from the podcast, why do you think the point of view is either first person or third person? Okay, so go back and re-listen and pull out evidence from that quote. And then, what does switching off points of view do to the story? So if we were to switch points of view in that story, when that happens, or if it happens, then what does that do to the story? How does that change the story? Okay. All right. Slide number 8. Slide number 8, I've created for you a Venn diagram. And here on this Venn diagram, what I want to know is, what were the similarities and the differences between slavery and indentured servants. So I want you to find those similarities and differences and put them on this slide. All right, my slide number 9 is we have begun to learn about Ben Franklin. Okay, he's a 14-year-old young kid. And I want you to look at him. Just a second. Sorry, I had the wrong slide. Okay, so we've been introduced to Ben Franklin. He's a 14-year-old kid. I want to know, based off of what we've heard on episode 1, what are his strengths, which I want you to type right here, and what are his weaknesses, okay? So think about his character. What are some great things that we've learned about him so far, and what are some things that they're weak for him and that they're going to probably get him into trouble. They're things he has to work on. Finally is slide 10. So slide 10 is I have 2 quick questions for you. Episode 1 is titled The Peculiar Case of Veracity Quince. And we find out the possible identity of Veracity Quince at the very end of the episode. But the young girl who came to talk to Ben, she is an indentured servant, and she got in trouble because they accused her of stealing the silver teapot. I want you to predict, who do you think was the one who stole the silver teapot? Was it her or was it somebody else? I want you to tell me what you think and why. Then the second box is better an egg today than a hen tomorrow. And that is something that Ben Franklin says at the beginning of the episode. This is called a proverb. Okay, a proverb is a short saying that states a general truth. It's like a piece of advice. Better an egg today than a hen tomorrow. And I want you to ponder about what do you think that proverb means, and I want you to write your best guess based off of the context that you hear in that part of the podcast in the beginning, and based off of kind of what you know about Ben Franklin. What is it that you think better an egg today than a hen tomorrow means? Next week, we will listen to episode 2. I will talk to you guys about this proverb and and the point of view. We'll kind of start to have these conversations via webcam, and then we'll listen to episode 2, and we're going to find out a little bit more about Ben Franklin and his adventures as a young 14-year-old kid. I can't wait to share this podcast with you guys. I'm so excited, and if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Bye.